My brother stole my savings while I worked abroad for family, so I returned calmly and took back control without yelling, begging, or explaining anything. I'm a 27-year-old guy, and for as long as I can remember, I've been the responsible one in my family, the quiet son who didn't argue, didn't complain, and always stepped in when things started falling apart. While other kids were allowed to mess up, I learned early that my mistakes came with consequences, silence, or guilt. Responsibility wasn't praised directly, it was expected, like breathing. And somehow, I accepted that role without ever questioning who decided it for me. Growing up, my parents leaned on me emotionally in ways I didn't fully understand back then. They vented to me, worried out loud to me, and treated me like a backup adult. At the same time, my younger brother was protected from pressure, excused for mistakes, and praised for the bare minimum. If he failed, it was bad luck. If I struggled, it was disappointment. That imbalance became normal in our house, like background noise you stop noticing. When an overseas job opportunity came up, my parents framed it as a family solution. "This will change everything," my mom said, her voice soft but hopeful. "Just a few years, and we'll all be stable." My brother nodded along, unusually supportive. They told me my sacrifice would finally put us on solid ground. I wanted to believe them. I agreed to go, even though it meant isolation, long hours, and starting from zero in a foreign place. We agreed I'd send most of my income home. They would manage it responsibly, cover essentials, and keep things fair. I remember my dad saying, "We trust you. You're the strong one." Back then, I truly believed loyalty meant endurance. I believed love meant giving without keeping score. I told myself that being needed meant being valued. What I didn't realize, not yet, was that this decision quietly locked me into a role I would later struggle to escape. And once I left, the rules began changing in ways I wouldn't see until it was already too late. When I first arrived abroad, everything felt temporary, like I was just passing through a hard chapter for the sake of something better. I worked long shifts, sometimes double, coming home to a quiet room that smelled like instant noodles and detergent. At night, I'd sit on my bed scrolling through messages from home, convincing myself the distance meant progress. My parents checked in often at first, asking if I was eating enough, if work was manageable. My brother would send casual updates, always short, always confident. Before I left, we had what they called a family understanding. I'd send most of my salary back, and they'd handle expenses responsibly. Rent, bills, emergencies, all of it would be managed fairly. My brother even offered to help oversee things since he was physically there. "Don't worry," he said once, laughing lightly, "I've got it covered." I wanted to trust that tone, that ease. At first, the requests were small. "Just a little extra this month." Something unexpected came up. "We'll balance it next time." Each message came wrapped in guilt or reassurance. My mom would say, "We'd never misuse your money." My dad would add, "Families don't keep score." And every time I hesitated, I felt selfish for even pausing. So I sent more. I skipped meals. I ignored how tired I felt. I told myself this was what being dependable looked like. When friends asked why I never spent on myself, I joked that I was investing in family. Inside, I felt strangely proud of being needed. But small things started bothering me. The updates became vague. Numbers stopped lining up. When I asked simple questions, the mood shifted. My brother's replies got defensive. My parents brushed things off with, "You're overthinking again." I told myself stress was making me paranoid. That distance messes with your head. That trust meant silence. Still, late at night, staring at my cracked phone screen, a quiet unease began settling in my chest, the kind you try to ignore because admitting it might mean everything you believed was built on something fragile. Life abroad slowly turned into a routine of exhaustion and restraint. I worked long hours, sometimes 6 or 7 days a week, coming home with sore hands and a mind that never really shut off. My room was small and bare, the kind of place that reminds you you're only there to survive, not live. I kept telling myself it was temporary. Every transfer I sent home felt like proof that the struggle meant something. My family stayed in touch, but the tone changed. Conversations became shorter, more transactional. My mom would ask how much I could send that month before asking how I was doing. My dad's messages sounded rehearsed, like he was repeating lines meant to keep me calm. My brother, meanwhile, spoke with new confidence. He'd casually mention going out, buying things, handling stuff around the house. I told myself I was imagining the shift. I started asking harmless questions. Can you send me a breakdown of expenses, or how much is left from last month? The replies were vague. Don't stress about it. Everything's under control. You worry too much. Once, my brother laughed and said, "Man, you've changed since you left." That line stuck with me longer than it should have. At night, lying in the dark, I replayed conversations in my head. The numbers didn't add up. The explanations kept changing. I felt guilty for doubting them, like I was betraying my own family by even thinking something was wrong. At the same time, a tight knot formed in my chest whenever payday came around. I started noticing how careful they were with words, how quickly they shut things down when I pressed for clarity. My parents would sigh and say I was being dramatic. "You always overthink," my mom said once. "We raised you better than this." That hurt more than I expected. I told myself to stay quiet. To work harder. To trust more. After all, they were my family. And families didn't take advantage of each other, right? Still, something inside me had shifted. The trust one once gave freely now came with a quiet ache, a growing sense that I was standing on ground that could give way at any moment, and I wouldn't see the fall coming. The first real cracks didn't come as explosions. They came as small moments I kept brushing aside because admitting them felt dangerous. A comment here. A contradiction there. My brother would mention buying something expensive, then laugh it off when I asked how he afforded it. "Relax," he'd say, "you're acting like our dad." The way he said it made me feel embarrassed for even asking. I started noticing how my parents defended him automatically. If I brought up a concern, my mom's voice would tighten. "Why are you interrogating your own brother?" she'd ask. My dad would sigh and say I was becoming difficult since moving abroad. Somehow, the problem always turned into my attitude, not their answers. The more questions I asked, the colder the conversations became. There were moments when the story didn't match the timing. Bills that were supposedly paid still came up again. Emergencies repeated themselves too neatly. I asked for receipts once, trying to sound casual, and the silence on the call stretched long enough to make my stomach drop. My brother finally laughed and said, "You really don't trust us anymore, huh?" That sentence landed heavy, like an accusation dressed as a joke. At night, my room felt smaller than before. The hum of traffic outside mixed with the buzz in my head as I replayed every exchange. I told myself I was being ungrateful. That distance was messing with my judgment. That stress was turning me into someone paranoid and cold. I hated that version of myself. Still, I started paying closer attention. The way my brother dodged specifics. The way my parents shut conversations down the moment money came up. The way guilt always followed my questions. I began saving screenshots without really admitting why. Just in case, I told myself. I felt torn in two, one part still desperate to believe in them, the other quietly preparing for something I didn't want to name yet. Every message felt heavier. Every transfer felt riskier. And beneath all of it, a slow, uncomfortable realization started forming: if something was wrong, it had probably been wrong for a long time. I just hadn't been ready to see it. The moment things truly shifted wasn't dramatic. It was casual, almost accidental, which somehow made it worse. A distant relative messaged me one evening, asking if I was excited about the new purchase. I stared at the screen, confused, rereading the message 3 times before replying, "What purchase?" There was a pause. Then a vague response, "Oh. I thought you knew." My stomach dropped. I tried to brush it off, but the unease stuck with me all night. The next morning, I started quietly retracing timelines in my head: payments I'd sent, amounts I remembered, things my brother had mentioned in passing. The numbers didn't line up. Not even close. There were gaps I couldn't explain, stretches of time where money should have existed but somehow didn't. When I asked my brother directly, I kept my tone light. "Hey, quick question, what was that thing you bought recently?" There was a pause before he answered, longer than usual. His voice shifted, defensive and sharp. "Why are you suddenly keeping tabs on me?" he snapped. "You don't trust me now?" That question flipped something in the conversation. Suddenly, I was the problem. He accused me of being controlling, of acting superior because I worked abroad. When I tried to explain I was just confused, he cut me off. "You think you're better than us now," he said. I remember staring at the wall, my phone pressed to my ear, heart pounding. I went to my parents, hoping for clarity. Instead, I got pressure. My mom sighed deeply and said I was creating drama. My dad told me to stop digging into things that would damage family peace. They insisted everything was fine, that I was overreacting, that stress had changed me. That night, I couldn't sleep. My chest felt tight, like something heavy was sitting on it. I opened my banking app and scrolled through old transfers, dates, amounts, patterns. For the first time, I allowed myself to think the thought I'd been avoiding. What if they weren't just careless? What if they were hiding something on purpose? The realization didn't come with anger. It came with a cold, sinking fear, the kind that tells you the ground beneath your feet has already started to crack. The truth didn't explode all at once. It leaked out slowly, in pieces I wasn't supposed to see. One evening after work, exhausted and restless, I logged into an old account I hadn't checked in months, one my brother once helped organize. I don't even remember why I tried the password again. I just had a feeling I couldn't shake. When it opened, my hands started trembling. There were transactions I didn't recognize. Large ones. Repeated ones. Transfers that lined up perfectly with the timeline of his new lifestyle, the upgrades, the trips, the confidence. My chest went cold as I scrolled. This wasn't mismanagement. This wasn't confusion. This was deliberate. My money had been moving, quietly and consistently, into places it was never meant to go. I sat there staring at the screen, my ears ringing, my mouth dry. My first instinct was denial. Maybe I was misunderstanding something. Maybe there was an explanation I hadn't heard yet. So I called him. When he picked up, I kept my voice steady and asked him to explain what I was seeing. There was a pause. A long one. Then he sighed, not guilty, not surprised, just annoyed. "You're making a big deal out of nothing," he said. When I pushed, his tone hardened. "I handled things. Someone had to. You weren't even here." I asked him directly if he used my savings. He didn't deny it. "Instead," he said, "you owe this family. You left. I stayed and dealt with everything." That sentence hit harder than any insult. My hands were shaking, my heart pounding so loud I could hear it in my ears. When I called my parents afterward, hoping for balance, they defended him. My mom said, "He needed it more than you." My dad added, "You're earning well. Don't be selfish." That was the moment everything shifted. The confusion turned into something sharper. Colder. Clearer. I realized this wasn't a misunderstanding, it was entitlement. And worse, it was normalized. Years of sacrifice had quietly turned into permission. I didn't argue. I didn't yell. I ended the call politely. But inside, something broke and rearranged itself at the same time. For the first time, I stopped asking why they did it, and started thinking about what I needed to do next. After that call, I didn't confront anyone again. Not because I forgave them, but because I finally understood something important: arguing would only warn them. So I went quiet. I answered messages normally. I sent short replies. I kept my tone polite, even warm. On the outside, nothing had changed. On the inside, I was watching everything. I started paying attention to patterns I'd ignored before. How my brother only reached out near payday. How my parents suddenly became affectionate when money was involved. How silence followed whenever I asked neutral questions. It felt like watching a play where I finally knew the script. Every line made sense now, and that clarity hurt more than confusion ever did. At night, I began documenting things. Screenshots. Dates. Old messages. Transfer confirmations. I organized them carefully, like evidence I wasn't ready to use yet. My room felt colder during those hours, lit only by my phone screen while the rest of the city slept. There was something heavy about realizing you had to protect yourself from your own family. The hardest part was pretending nothing was wrong. My brother joked with me like always. My mom asked if I was eating enough. My dad reminded me how proud they were of me. Each word felt rehearsed. Hollow. I responded calmly, even kindly, while my chest burned with things I couldn't say. Some nights I questioned myself. Maybe I was being dramatic. Maybe this was just how families worked. But then I'd reread the messages. See the amounts. Hear my brother's dismissive tone echo in my head. The doubt would settle again, heavy and undeniable. I stopped sending extra money. Not abruptly, just small delays, excuses about bank issues or overtime problems. Almost immediately, the pressure increased. Messages came faster. The tone sharpened. Guilt crept back in, stronger than before. That alone told me everything. They weren't worried about me. They were worried about access. That realization hurt more than any argument could have. It stripped away the last illusion I had left. And somewhere in that quiet, painful clarity, a new thought formed, calm, steady, and dangerous in its certainty. If they could take from me without guilt, then I needed to start protecting myself without apology. The real breaking point came faster than I expected. One evening, I checked my account after work, mostly out of habit, and felt my stomach drop. The balance was almost gone. Not low, gone. My hands went numb as I refreshed the page again and again, hoping it was a glitch. It wasn't. Large transfers had gone through only days earlier, draining what little I had managed to protect. I remember sitting on the edge of my bed, staring at the wall as the noise of the city bled in through the window. My chest felt tight, like I couldn't get a full breath. I called my brother immediately. This time, he didn't even pretend to be surprised. He sounded irritated, like I was interrupting him. "Yeah, I used it," he said. "It was needed. You'll make more." I asked him how he could do that without asking me. He snapped back, "You act like it's your money. Everything you have is because of this family." His words hit harder than the theft itself. I felt something inside me crack open, a mix of shock, humiliation, and grief I didn't know how to name. I called my parents next, desperate for someone to say this had gone too far. My mom cried, not for me, but for how difficult I was being. My dad said I was selfish for caring about money when family unity was at stake. "Your brother needed it more," he repeated, like a rule carved in stone. That was my rock bottom. I hung up and sat in silence, staring at the floor. My savings were gone. My trust was gone. And somehow, I was being blamed for all of it. The room felt unbearably quiet, heavy with the realization that no one was coming to protect me. I felt stupid for believing sacrifice would ever be repaid with care. That night, I didn't cry loudly. I just sat there, hollow and shaking, realizing that the people I worked myself to exhaustion for had no problem emptying me out completely. And in that emptiness, something dark and steady settled in, not rage, not sadness, but resolve. I knew I couldn't keep surviving like this. Something had to change. After that night, something inside me went still. Not numb, focused. I stopped reacting emotionally and started thinking carefully. I didn't confront anyone again. I didn't accuse, argue, or explain. I learned that silence, when used deliberately, could be more powerful than any outburst. They expected panic or pleading. I gave them calm. The first thing I did was protect what little I had left. I contacted my bank during my lunch break, my voice steady even though my hands shook. I asked about access, permissions, old links, anything that could still be exploited. Piece by piece, I began locking things down. New passwords. New accounts. New boundaries. Each small step felt like reclaiming oxygen. I started reviewing everything more carefully: old messages, timelines, promises. Patterns emerged that made my stomach turn. The pressure always came right before money moved. The affection always followed it. Every "we're proud of you" lined up neatly with a withdrawal. Seeing it laid out so clearly hurt, but it also cleared the fog I'd been living in. I didn't tell them I was changing anything. I let them assume things were normal. When they asked about transfers, I blamed delays, paperwork, system issues. The same excuses they'd used on me. The irony wasn't lost on me. For the first time, I was in control of the pace. Their messages became more frequent. More emotional. My mom started sending long texts about family loyalty. My dad reminded me how much they had done for me. My brother grew impatient, short, irritated. The pressure was ramping up, and that confirmed I was doing the right thing. Late at night, alone in my room, I wrestled with guilt. I'd been trained to feel responsible for everyone else's comfort. Choosing myself felt wrong, almost cruel. But then I'd remember the empty balance. The way my voice shook when no one cared. The way they closed ranks against me. I wasn't plotting revenge. I wasn't angry enough for that. I was preparing. Quietly. Carefully. Because I finally understood something painful but freeing: if I didn't protect myself now, no one ever would. And I wasn't going to let them drain me again. A few months later, I told them I was coming home for a short visit. I kept my message simple, almost casual. No confrontation. No emotion. Just logistics. My mom responded instantly, overly cheerful, full of emojis and relief. My brother acted normal, even friendly. None of them sensed what was coming, and that was the point. When I arrived, everything felt strangely familiar and foreign at the same time. The house smelled the same. The walls looked the same. But I wasn't the same person who had left. I watched them closely: the way my brother avoided eye contact, the way my parents tried too hard to act loving. It felt like walking onto a stage where everyone already had their lines prepared. We sat down together a few days later. I asked for a family talk. My voice was calm, almost flat. That alone seemed to make them uneasy. My mom smiled nervously and asked if something was wrong. I took a breath and said I just wanted clarity. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't accuse. I simply started laying things out: dates, amounts, screenshots. One by one. Slowly. Carefully. I slid my phone across the table. The room went quiet in a way that felt heavy and unreal. My brother's face drained of color. My dad stopped speaking mid-sentence. My mom kept blinking, like she was waiting for the moment to reset. When my brother finally spoke, his words came out rushed and defensive. "You're twisting things." I asked him to explain the transfers. He couldn't. My dad tried to interrupt, saying this wasn't the time. I told him calmly that this was the time. I wasn't angry. That seemed to scare them more. For the first time, they weren't controlling the story. I wasn't asking for permission or understanding. I was stating facts. Boundaries. Decisions. I told them I had already secured my finances and cut access. I wasn't here to fight, I was here to inform them. The silence that followed was thick and unfamiliar. And in that silence, I felt something shift. The power dynamic they'd relied on for years was breaking quietly, irreversibly right in front of them. The moment the reality sank in, the tone in the room changed completely. My brother was the first to react. His voice rose, sharp and defensive, accusing me of betrayal, of turning my back on family. He said I was being dramatic, that I was overreacting, that I was trying to punish them. The words came fast, messy, desperate, nothing like the confidence he used to carry. My parents followed quickly. My mom's eyes filled with tears, her voice shaking as she asked how I could do this to them. She said I was breaking her heart, that families don't keep score, that I was being cruel. My dad tried a different angle, calmer but heavier. He talked about sacrifice, tradition, how much they had given up for me. He said I was forgetting where I came from. Listening to them felt surreal. Every sentence was familiar. I'd heard these same emotional tools my whole life: guilt, fear, obligation, just never this clearly. I noticed how none of them actually denied what they'd done. They were only angry that I had stopped allowing it. For a brief second, I felt the old reflex kick in. The urge to apologize. To smooth things over. To take responsibility for their feelings. My chest tightened, and my throat burned. This was the moment that used to break me. But instead, I took a slow breath and said something simple. I'm not arguing. I'm not asking for approval. I'm just letting you know how things are going to be from now on. They stared at me like I'd spoken a foreign language. I told them I wouldn't be sending money anymore. That my finances were separate. That any future relationship would have to exist without pressure or manipulation. My voice shook slightly, but I didn't stop. I didn't explain myself further. I didn't defend my choice. My brother scoffed and muttered something under his breath. My mom cried harder. My dad went quiet, his jaw tight. The room felt heavy, tense, fragile, like something old and brittle finally cracking under its own weight. And as I stood up to leave, heart pounding but spine straight, I realized something terrifying and freeing at the same time. They no longer had power over me. They just hadn't accepted it yet. Leaving that house felt nothing like I imagined it would. There was no dramatic slam of the door, no final speech, no rush of victory. Just a quiet walk outside, the air feeling strangely lighter against my skin. My hands were shaking, but my chest felt open in a way it never had before. For the first time in my life, I had chosen myself and the world didn't end. The weeks after were uncomfortable in a different way. The messages came in waves. Some angry. Some pleading. Some pretending nothing had happened. My mom sent long paragraphs about family bonds and forgiveness. My dad tried to sound reasonable, asking if we could talk like adults. My brother oscillated between silence and bitterness. I didn't argue with any of them. I replied briefly, when I replied at all, and only on my terms. Distance changed everything. Without the constant pressure, I started noticing how quiet my mind felt. I slept better. I stopped checking my phone every few minutes. I stopped feeling guilty for buying myself simple things. The anxiety that had lived in my chest for years slowly loosened its grip. For the first time, my money, my time, and my energy finally belonged to me. I also started seeing the past more clearly. How being the responsible one had never been a compliment, it was a role assigned so others could stay comfortable. How love had always come with conditions. How my silence had been mistaken for consent. None of that was my failure. There was no apology. No dramatic realization from them. And strangely, I no longer needed one. Closure didn't come from their understanding. It came from mine. I still think about them sometimes. I still grieve the family I thought I had. But I don't feel small anymore. I don't feel trapped. I don't feel owned. What I feel now is steady. Grounded. Free. I didn't take revenge. I didn't yell or beg or destroy anything. I simply took my life back quietly, firmly, and for good.